Hello, and welcome back to American English Pronunciation. This is episode 2.1, and today we're going to be talking about contractions. Okay, contractions are used a lot in American spoken English, not so much in writing, and certainly never in American academic writing. Contractions are absolutely forbidden there. But generally when we talk about contractions, we're talking about spoken English, vocal English. So we generally use an apostrophe to make a contraction. For example, you are becomes your. And that apostrophe replaces one or more letters and here space as well, replaces one or more letters. That makes it different, for example, from an apostrophe that's used for possessives. For example, America's politics, for example. There, the apostrophe is indicated, it indicates a possession of politics. Now, some of my students know how to do, how to actually write contractions very, very well, but in terms of speaking, they tend to not know exactly how they're pronounced, and this is because they were taught by non-native English speakers. They were taught by speakers of their own languages who learned English. But the thing is, and this is why I'm doing this, obviously, you need to recognize that things that are contractions, words that are contractions, are pronounced differently from the separate words, and they're supposed to be pronounced differently. They're designed to be pronounced differently. That shortens things as that shortens the speaking speed, and it makes it slightly easier for people to say what they need to say. But remember that your is pronounced differently from you are. It's not your, it's your. And in fact, it's the same pronunciation as your. Those are known as homophones, that is, words that are pronounced similarly but have different spellings. Okay, so here's somebody who's going to be talking to you about and exemplifying contractions. And then I'll be back to talk about some of the things that you may have noticed while she pronounces, and also some of the exceptions. So, see you later.
Cannot, can't, could not, couldn't, have not, haven't, has not, hasn't, had not, hadn't, is not, isn't, are not, aren't, was not, wasn't, were not, weren't, would not, wouldn't. You are, you're, we are, we're, they are, they're, could have, could've, coulda, would have, would've, woulda, should have, should've, shoulda, I have, I've, you have, you've, we have, we've, she, he has, she's, he's, they have, they've, I will, I'll, you will, you'll, we will, wheel. She, he will. She'll, he'll. They will, they'll. I would, I'd. You would, you'd. We would, we'd. He, she would, he'd, she'd. They would, they'd.
Hi, welcome back. A couple of things that I want to talk about after those pronunciations, and one of those is the difference between can and can't. Some of my students say, I don't understand how you can tell the difference between somebody saying can and can't because they don't seem to pronounce the T, and they're talking about native English speakers now. And I agree, a lot of native English speakers do not pronounce their final T with can't, meaning cannot. I agree. Here's a hint. When somebody says, I can do it, they usually don't say, I can do it. They say, I can do it. I can do it. So what they're doing is they're sort of making a word that sounds like that. Kin meaning family. I can do it. I can do it. If they say, I can't do it, I can't do it, that A, that short A, will be very, very obvious. In fact, they might even add a sort of shake of the head, I can't do it. That means they can't do it, they cannot do it. If they say, I can do it, I can do it, I can do it, that means that they can do it because they're pronouncing that as kin. Okay? So listen for those very, very slight differences, and also look at the gestures that somebody's making with their head or possibly with their hands. If they say, I can't do it, that means no, they can't do it. They cannot do it. Okay, another thing is the could have, could've, coulda, which is also would and should. All right, I gave you these because here is how it is in academic English. It would be spelled C-O-U-L-D space H-A-V-E, could have. In speech and in very informal writing, it's could've. I could've. I could have done it. I could have done it. But in practice, a lot of times your native English speakers won't be pronouncing the V. Instead, they'll be saying something like coulda. I could have done it. I would have done it. I should have done it. I should have done that. You know, it's simply the way that the final V gets dropped out in vernacular, in actual speech. So I want you to listen to that. And also, I want to warn you, don't use coulda, woulda, shoulda yourselves, because you're already coping with, your listeners coping with a slightly different accent. Okay? If you drop that final V, they may not understand you at all because they have so much to absorb. Okay, here's one more thing. Because remember, as I've said repeatedly in these episodes, the speaker bears the burden of creating understanding, meaning you have to be clear. You have to be very clear. It's not the listener's job. It's your job, even though you're not a native speaker of English. Okay, another thing that I want to talk about is multiple contractions. Oh, wow. What is that? I'd have done it. I'd have done it if I knew that it would be so easy. I would have done it. I would have done it. I'd have done it. So sometimes you will come across people who are multiplying their contractions and making liaisons or ties between so many words that it's very sort of tough to figure out what exactly they're saying. I'd have done it means I would have done it. It's simply somebody who is combining and smushing together, mashing together their words to make lots of different contractions. I would have done it, I'd have done it. There are other possibilities too, obviously. Okay, that's all I really wanted to say about contractions. Use contractions in your speech as long as you pronounce them. Don't don't think that you can avoid those final T's, those final R's, because those are very, very different, as we can see between the can and can't. That can't really needs that final T. In our next episode, I'll be talking about J's, and that's particularly important for people whose first language is Spanish or Portuguese, because final J, whether it's at the beginning, the middle, or the end of a word, very few are at the end of the word, is something that we really expect to hear, that native English speakers really expect to hear as a J, not as a Y or as an H. Okay, as I said before, I think I've been putting these on YouTube, so please listen and like and subscribe. In the meantime, practice your contractions as much as you can, because those are things that will help you speed up your English, and also listening, they will help you understand the speaker. All right? Okay, good to see you. Thanks. Bye-bye.